Welcome to Growing Pains, a show where we help entrepreneurs, founders grow their company and realize the changes that come with funding that include transformational changes of the team, the organization, the technology, and everything about it. And we introduce you to guests who can help you along that journey and also give some perspective on where things are happening in the world of technology. So today I'm welcomed Chris Hood, who joins us from the United States and is an author. He's a consultant as well, who strategizes on customer-centric approaches to especially retail. And he's been with Google. He's the guy who creates the games that show up before a movie in every theater in North America, which used to be just a slideshow of the local advertisers. So Chris has built a few companies, sold a couple, and worked with some of the biggest tech companies in the world, Google included, where he was head of technology innovation, which sounds redundant if you're already Google. But Chris was head of technology innovation for customer service, customer success. Is that correct, Chris?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So he's been around and knows a lot of things. And I would say he's a bit of a contrarian because he doesn't believe that AI is where everyone thinks it is or expects it to be. And we're going to talk a bit about that today. So welcome to the show, Chris.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And did I miss anything in that intro that could help us understand where we're going to go?
No, I think you've covered it. Yeah, 35 years of experience and still going.
Interesting that your books, one of which is called Inf-AI-lable, which is you can see in the back corner there, which is play on the words with AI, with fail. You are touting that we are not in the world of dreamland for AI, where I can wake up and a robot can make my coffee. Actually, that's already been true for a while, but that's a time device. You know, we don't have to think of humanistic robots, but maybe heuristic. So where are we then in your perspective as it relates to AI on the hype versus reality?
Yeah, it's interesting. And we could cover a lot of different areas of this, but even if we think about like the hype cycle, Gartner has a hype cycle that comes out that kind of shows the process of new technologies and how it enters the market. Well, artificial intelligence and machine learning have been around for 60 plus years. And so if we're thinking about this as a hype, in reality, it's probably one of the largest and longest hype cycles that we've really seen. Even if we think, 60 years ago, we had the foundations of artificial intelligence. Then over the course of those years, if we look back 20 years ago, we had recommendation engines, we had algorithms, we had the introduction of personalization. Companies like Netflix and Starbucks have been using artificial intelligence without calling it artificial intelligence for years. What we have seen more recently, though, is the access to the technology. The common person being able to engage with that AI in different ways, which has created this kind of gold rush mentality towards what's new and shiny and interesting. The technology itself has not changed much. It's the access to that technology that has really changed. Again, we think about something like a chatbot. The first chatbot was easily 30 years ago. And so this is an example of how hype has definitely changed our perspectives. The amount of data that we have available, the access, speed of the internet, being able to, pick up things on our phone, like all of that is really what has changed the current environment. And I think if we kind of look at this holistically, we are trying to reinvent something that may or may not need reinvention.
So let me take that back a bit. I mean, clearly, the science behind AI and everything around that science, and I call it neuro-linguistic programming, or no, that's Tony Robbins. Sorry, I'm trying to think of the word neuroprogramming, where you're replicating the neurons, the neuropathy. What is that called again? I'm sorry, a little brain gap.
Are you talking about like just neuroscience embedded into AI?
Yes. So thinking machines, really, as opposed to programmatic responses. I mean, that's been, the science may have not changed, but the enablement of computing power and distribution is massive. Because in the times that you're talking about, there wasn't a personal computer, let alone an iPhone, on which you could actually execute on these things. So you have distribution, computing, and networks that have enabled that science to be distributed. So that's enabling, which offers personalization and hype. And the speed with which that computing actually activates is phenomenal. So, I'm using it every day. and it's incredible at how it has improved my life and my productivity. So how is that not a reality, and how is that hype?
Yeah. So, I think it's a good way to kind of distinguish it. The, as we said, the accessibility of AI has obviously drastically improved. And even if we look 5 years, 10 years into the future, if we think about things like quantum computing becoming more realistic, that's going to even further enhance our access to really high-powered artificial intelligence. So access aside, then we think of what benefits are we getting from this artificial intelligence? Like you said, your life has been completely changed, productivity has improved, and all of these things. There are definitely metrics out there that are showing that the use of artificial intelligence is in improving aspects of our lives. There's also a lot of stats out there that are showing the negative impact of especially generative AI. We're looking at challenges with legal, ethical, critical thinking skills just from a human nature are actually declining because of generative AI. So there are a lot of sides to, what we'll just call it productivity or results from artificial intelligence. I definitely do not argue that AI is not a valuable tool.
You're right. I know.
What we see is that how we position that tool into the mainstream public is where we get hype. So what you're seeing is a lot of organizations that are promoting AI and their generative AI, packages, products, and services as, well, we can solve all of your problems. Well, it can't. It can solve some problems, but it can't solve all of your problems. And then, of course, we get into the traditional marketing challenges of this, where we are promoting things and problems that don't exist. If you've seen the Salesforce commercial as an example, where you've got Matthew McConaughey sitting out in the rain, and it says, well, if I had, an AI agent to tell me that it was raining, I wouldn't be sitting out here in the rain for my dinner. Well, I mean, it's just ridiculous on nature, right? To assume that, one, the restaurant wouldn't know that it's raining outside when it's clearly raining and have your guest come inside, or that the weather app wouldn't have told you, or that it's creating these problems and associating artificial intelligence as the savior for our own humanity, when in reality, it's just creating fictional, non-relevant scenarios. And so if you expand on that, we could talk about autonomy in AI as another example. There's no autonomy in AI. AI is not autonomous. It follows a set of instructions. It's automation. And yet we've taken this word and we've manipulated into a way to make AI feel more relevant, humanistic to our daily lives, so that we can equate it to, again, these needs or these expectations, even from a business perspective, that it could potentially solve these problems in a way that it really can't. And so that's the area of hype that I focus a lot on. It's not to say that it can't do a lot of really great things. It's not saying that it's not a powerful tool. It's not saying that it's relevant for our lives or that it's going to go away at some point in time. It's not going to go away. But I think what's more critical is that we have an understanding of what it actually can do and not try to position it into a technology that is able to do things that it's unable to do.
Okay. So, I mean, ridiculously oversimplistic marketing aside with, rain scenarios, let's look at what even the CEO of Anthropic, who I would say is a fairly conservative leader in the space, is saying we're 18 months from generative AI, and so it will not require a coder, a programmer to actually execute on these things. Where do you think we are in those terms?
No one knows. Anybody who says we're X number of months away from generative AI is just guessing. Like there is no clear science, data, technology, anything that would be to indicate that we are close, but there's also nothing to say that we couldn't unlock that tomorrow, right? That's the reality. Like some people say that we will never hit generative AI. Like if you actually look at some of the, the philosophical and very smart people out there in the world, there's clear indication that, that generative AI, not generative, that, you know what I'm saying? That we will never reach that. And yet there are other people, 18 months. There are some people that say 5 years. There are some people, we're all over the place. And I think what we have to be aware of is that there is research going on in the space. Yes, we are attempting to achieve it. Yes, there is a lot of things that have to be accomplished in order to do that. But an actual date, there's no way of knowing.
Okay. Okay. I would agree with that. But I would say that those that are building it would probably have a better educated guess than anybody else and what they're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that people who are deeply involved in it definitely have a theoretical perspective that is probably a little bit more grounded in reality. Still, I still stay. We're probably quite a way away from it.
Yeah. Well, when you were at Google, you weren't working in the AI side of the business, right? You were. Okay. So, I mean, can you talk about some of that and how they were approaching it and how you think that may have changed since the release of OpenAI's ChatGPT and the shockwaves that created?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest change was we moved from actually focused on, AI as an automated service to AI as generative AI. I mean, everything basically switched to generative AI. That's why we saw like Gemini come out. And that was kind of pushed out because of OpenAI. It was all, it goes back into this when you're changing kind of your direction of research to fit a narrative that is out there in the public. I look at that as hype, right? Like I'm going to ride this wave and try to profit from it as best as possible. That's really what, Google has done is let's try to get products out there that people are buying. It doesn't mean that they're not still doing some research. Clearly, there's a lot of research still going on. And I think that's all going to be really relevant over the course of the next couple of years. But I think publicly, it's really just been a big shift to the generative AI space.
And so can you talk about, I mean, I know that everything that goes on in Google is under secrecy, but is there stuff that you can talk about that was released in your tenure or has been released since your tenure that you guys were working on and created?
Really, honestly, nothing new. So there's, again, there's an example. Gemini is probably the newest thing that was released. And again, all that is really just a repackaging of the generative AI that they already had in place. A lot of the AI components, like on Google Cloud, as an example, have been there for 10 years. And, if we go down the list of companies that have embedded those AI tools, it's massive. I talked about like Netflix and Starbucks as an example. Disney, there's hundreds of companies out there who have implemented AI into their stack over the course of the last 10, 15 years that had nothing to do with generative AI. Mostly it was all just various algorithms, various learning procedures, automation flows, and that's all still there. It's only recently have we started to label it, powered by AI. Even though it's been in those places. Voice recognition, as an example, has been a huge part. You look at like Google Nest devices, home devices, no different than like Alexa devices. All of that voice recognition, voice simulation, all of that has been actually around as part of the Google services for 10, 15 years.
Yeah. No, I totally agree that it's exploded in awareness and marketing hype since ChatGPT because everyone needed to catch up. But I challenge the changes literally in the last 24 months have been so dramatic. And every month there seems to be another level of progress that nobody had anticipated that could happen for 6 months happens in 2 months. It's just, talk about dog years. It's really accelerating, right?
Yeah, I've shared, if we go back, and somebody was arguing with me about e-commerce as an example, but even if we look at websites, websites came out, then, the internet exploded. Everybody's like, hey, I need a website, and that clearly was revolutionary. Then mobile, came out and Apple iPhone, and then that kind of just exploded and everybody needed an app for that, et cetera. E-commerce, everybody wanted to be online and selling things. And then we get to AI, and AI has exploded unlike any, you could take web.
You missed mobile in between AI.
But you could take all of those technologies over the last 20 years and combine them together, and AI has obliterated them.
Right.
In terms of what it's been able to do. So yeah, on that, I'm with you. I'm hugely impressed. Every day I wake up and I'm just like, holy crap, like this is crazy how fast it's moving. and how much change the evolution of the AI itself, what it's going through is just astronomical.
Right. Okay, so let's take it to the previous book, which is the customer-centric approach to doing business, but keeping in the AI context. What do you have? Do you have a playbook or three things you'd like to share with us about what a SaaS business should do, given the rapid changes in the world that sustains? First of all, explain the customer-centric focus and the methodologies behind that, and then how to leverage AI in order to make it a better experience.
Yeah, sure. So, when I think customer-centric organizations, I think organizations that are focused on how to deliver products and services more to your consumer by ensuring that the culture within the organization recognizes the importance of the customer. And there's a lot of different ways that you can look at this. One example is the old phrase, the customer is always right. And there's a lot of people out there that obviously disagree with that. There's probably some nuances to that. And how I kind of position it is that a single customer may not always be right, but your customer base is definitely always right. And to recognize that and to understand that if you are making decisions that go against that customer base, you potentially are going to lose those customers. And so when we think about it and we start to build a culture around that premise, well, that means a lot of things. For example, how intimately does your non-customer facing roles understand the mindset that you're trying to implement with customer first? So like, does your financial officer think about customers first? Or do they think about internal finances first, right? There's a shift. Do your technologist, if you're doing an interview and you're hiring, say, a senior software engineer, is one of the questions during that interview something like, how do you think your role directly impacts our customers? Most interviews are thinking about like the technical implementations and those types of questions. So you get an idea of how you can build this culture around the customer. So then how does AI come into the place? Well, AI can be used for better understanding your customer, being able to deliver services and products to your customer, answer questions faster, all of those things that you would typically think about. I think the problem when we look at what's happening today is if you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to build a new company, most organizations or most entrepreneurs are starting with the technology. They're saying, I want to build an AI company because obviously AI is very popular and so they're looking at that technology and what kind of product am I going to build? What is the AI product? And what you really should be doing is still starting with your customer. What is the problem you are trying to solve? I'll position it as you've got to start with your customer first, or we'll say, what is the problem you are solving is first. Right. The technology is last. It is always last. And then after that, maybe you will use AI. This is another example of even in today's market where there is so much focus on AI, there are plenty of technologies out there that will solve consumer problems without ever really needing to use AI to do it. But if you're starting with that technology, if you're saying, I'm going to build an AI product, I'm going to use AI for something, and you start to work backwards, that's not customer centric. Right. And that is part of the challenges that, I spend a lot of time with large enterprises who look at it that way. I want to bring in the new technology. Well, what is it going to do? When you reverse that conversation, it changes the perspective.
Yeah. I mean, for a while there, everyone wanted a data scientist on their team. They had to have PhDs. They didn't even have the data to work with. Or they had nothing, but it was really good on their deck to have the PhD in data science. And so I can see where that goes wrong, definitely, and where you build a hammer and everything's a nail and you realize no one needs any nails and there's nothing worth hitting. So assuming that companies are building based off solutions, what would you say is the lowest hanging fruit of enabling AI to execute on? In your case, you're very product focused and you've been in customer success as Google. What would be the biggest enabler in your opinion for that?
Enabler for
Enhancing customer success
for enhancing customer success. So I think where we have to start to look at AI from a customer perspective is what points do you want AI to be in front of the customer and what points do you not? And I think really broadly, do you provide options? I think we're all familiar with the scenario. You've got a problem, you call up your bank or whoever. Actually, I had to call the IRS yesterday. I sat on hold.
Still working?
Yeah. I sat on hold for 2.5 hours before somebody finally, came to me. And the problem was that it was only a problem that a real human would be able to solve. There wasn't anything that I could do online. They didn't have the issue online. There was no form.
Claude couldn't answer your question for you?
Yeah. So, we've got, and even when I got the human, represented said, this is an interesting problem. I see what the issue is, and we were able to get through it, but it required a human to do.
It's interesting.
And so we're seeing, marketing campaigns that are differentiating themselves. Discover is a great example. Discover created an entire campaign over the course of last year. Like, you call us and you can talk to a real person. Well,
right.
You sound like a robot. These robots are sounding really good right now, right?
Oh, yeah, they sure are.
Yeah, and they are, but I do think that, there's still this kind of, we'll call it uncanny valley, which has primarily been used for visuals, but we still get into these modes where we can almost tell it's not a real person. We get frustrated. We need to talk to somebody. So these become options for you as a business. I would never recommend 100% of your interactions with your customer go through artificial intelligence. So there is a strategy here by which you have to distinguish, like, okay, this is okay to enhance my experience. This is not okay. This we definitely want to hand off. I think what's interesting is artificial intelligence is so powerful in the ability to recognize certain aspects. Why is it not intelligent enough to hand off when it needs to hand off?
Good.
And I'll paint a scenario which I think gives you some indication why this is at a business level. Let's imagine that, let's say I have a car loan and, I just had some medical emergency happen. I've been in the hospital. They're going to repossess my car. I'm overly dramatizing this, whatever. But I tap into my car loan and I say, look, I'm in the hospital. I'm unable to pay this right now. And you might get some sort of response that says, here's the process. Very rarely would you get
a body cast.
Yeah, very rarely are you going to get the option, would you like a 30-day extension on the payment?
Right.
Right? Which is probably what they really want. But no, if I want an extension on my payment, I'm going to have to call and talk to a real person, right? Now, here's what's interesting about this is if I was to ask CFOs across the entire country, how many times would you allow your AI to make a decision on extensions of bills paid? They would all probably say never, because that is part of their accounting that they have to keep track of. And yet, if we want to look at this at an empathetic, understanding point of view directly for the consumer, why can't the AI be smart enough to say, I'm going to grant an extension to this individual who's in this situation for their particular car loan and not penalize them? Right. And there's an example of how you as a business have to think through this, as opposed to just saying, oh, we're just going to have a chatbot. We're going to create some sort of FAQ, and we're only going to agree within the guardrails and governance of these are the things you can and cannot say, and deal with it.
Right. But most of these things actually do have that prompt or speak to an agent, press 5, right? So it's funny that speaking to an agent these days really means speaking to a computer, not to a person. It's just now start to say, would you like to speak to a human? And even on the chatbots, sometimes you have to say, I would like to talk to a human. Right. And then they'll say, oh, let me see if somebody's available. Right. Yeah. There's there's a company in Canada called Cement out of Calgary, and they actually talk about that scenario. They built that for telcos and what are called customers at risk, which are when they've gone beyond 60 days. And the premise was that not everybody who goes beyond 60 days is a bad customer. It's you want them to recover. Might have recently laid off, something might have happened, they're not working. And so instead of sending, a notice, hey, you're going to get cut off in 60, and if you don't pay, and then we're going to send the collectors for you and all those things. Hey, we notice you're a little bit late, true Canadian sense. You're a little bit late in your payments. Is there something we can help you with? Would you like to speak to somebody? Can we put you on this program? And actually what it was is an onboarding program, which is the reverse of the solicit. It's the onboarding program that they use to acquire customers applied to the customers that they're starting to lose. So while that person was getting, electricity bills with nasty notes and other bills with nasty notes, the one thing that comes in from the telco saying, hey, we understand your situation, we're here to help. Guess who gets paid first, and guess who gets a customer for life? Phenomenal program. Company's called Cement.
Yeah, I mean, and those are, I think, some of the great areas that we are seeing. I mean, we've got really, really, really good voice simulation now, and you could put that in various dialects. You can put that in various languages. So you could call up and it could say like, well, I know you're from Canada, so I'm going to make this AI sound like it's local from Canada. Well, I know you're from like the bayous of Mississippi, and we're going to make it sound like, and we're going to, make you feel like you're talking to somebody. I mean, all of that. I think emotional recognition in AI is the advancements in that is really impressive. Where now I can start to sense your agitation in your voice because you're getting frustrated. And I can say, maybe I can't help you with this, and let me hand it off to a person. I think it's crazy enough that even though we are advancing these areas, when they say hand it off, we still, as humans, have to repeat ourselves and re-explain the story. The context is not being shared across these different channels. And I think we've got to get to that place so that not only, okay, I feel comfortable talking to this AI agent, in this, dialect that sounds familiar and comfortable to me. But now after I've explained the entire situation, I do not want to have to re-explain it again if I end up handing off to somebody else.
But that's pretty basic. I mean,
you would think so.
We're recording and the transcripts are summarized into notes. That should be almost in real time, flipped up, right?
It should be, but unfortunately, you got a lot of businesses that have siloed systems, or you've got people who are in different areas and regions. A lot of people who are doing customer support are working from their homes now. Right? They're not in call centers. And so because of legacy systems and because of disparate integrations, you often will still have that problem.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about AI hacks that you use in your actual day-to-day. What are your 3 favorites?
And so to be honest, I don't use AI that much. I use ChatGPT. I obviously use a lot of AI that is embedded in systems. Like you do a Google search now and you get an AI response, although that is very, very poor right now. But the primary use cases that I use AI for is really just idea iterations, brainstorming, thinking about how to potentially word something. Really, it's interesting because I talked with somebody once before about brainstorming a new business. Say you're an entrepreneur and you're coming up with business ideas, and usually you're chatting with somebody and you're like, hey, let's, whiteboard this out and come up with some ideas. That has shifted, I think, to like ChatGPT or to other generative AI models where I could, have a brainstorming session. But I had to be, I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago, that there's immense bias inside of ChatGPT specifically. I call it the you bias because what it's doing is it's actually starting to, tell you things. It's, boosting up your ego. Like, oh man, gosh, this is the greatest idea I've ever heard of. Like I'm looking for a new business idea and it says, oh my gosh, like this is revolutionary. I know it's not. I mean, I know it's not. And so I've now equated it like if you've ever had an idea and you wanted to bounce it off somebody and you went and you like called your mom and you said, Mom, like I've got this new idea. Like, let me tell you. And you tell your mom and your mom says, yeah, it sounds like a great idea. She has no idea. Like my mom has no idea. Like you cannot validate your ideas with like your parents, your best friends, or
Right. Right.
or AI even now, to a point. But I use it a lot for that brainstorming process to get me to kind of think through concepts, challenges, if I've got a problem, like just really, even things like competitive analysis, like if you're doing anything like that, narrative testing, especially from a customer experience perspective, you're trying to get the right words to communicate out to your customer base, and you want to validate that narrative sequence, makes sense. Like all of those types of vetting, brainstorming, idea generation, expanding premises, that's brilliant. Like do it. Like, but things like, for me at least, like things like organization or note taking and those types of things, I just don't find them useful for me.
Really? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Do you cross over between LLM?
Sometimes. So I don't know if you've done this, but somebody actually shared this with me that they did it, and so I've tried it. I have done this where I've asked like one system a question, got the output, asked another system the same question and got the output, compared those, or you get an output on one system, you cut and paste that to the other system, and you say, could you validate this? What do you think about it?
I like
And
that.
then you get the other system to kind of respond to what the output was.
That guy's an idiot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I said, I think I need to create a generative AI that is actually more brutally honest. Like this is a stupid idea. Like, don't tell me but yeah, I will play kind of like that with, compare and contrast between different systems to see, if you get a different idea out of it. And yeah, the results have been really interesting just to kind of go back and forth between them.
Yeah. Yeah. I often, I ask Claude to make the prompt, and I tell Claude, I'm going to use another agent. So I need you to write a prompt to do this, 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 and this. Write me the prompt. And because they're so used to getting prompts, writes a great prompt. And then I throw that over to ChatGPT because it'll do more deep research and visit sites. And then I come back and then I ask Claude to give me the summarize. It's really,
yeah. I think anything like that, and I do think it helps with the bias that I'm talking about, not just the you bias, but I think also it's no different. If we really think about this, if we took LLMs and we said, this is like our diversity, like these are different people within our organizations, and we wanted to get an idea of like, Joe, what do you think? And Kim, what do you think? And if you looked at that personified as different LLMs, you're going to get these ideas that are going to help you have a more richer view of what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, that's very good. Very good. And what are some of the things you would never let AI do?
Brain surgery.
Well, actually,
yeah, there's two areas that I've had a lot of conversations with, legal and medical.
So why legal? Because legal is, it's been proving itself to improve its marks and exams. So why not legal?
So this goes back to, autonomy and AI and thinking about it as a human. If you were in these scenarios, or I could do it in a medical, like surgery, or in legal. Let's just say you've been accused of murder and you get the choice between an AI attorney or a human attorney. Who do you pick?
Well, obviously a human, yeah.
Why?
Well, because this is a emotional human situation. I mean, that's, it's a jury will be involved, etc. That's different. Yeah. I'm talking about legal advice on, say, contracts or things like that.
Sure, but exactly. But at what point do we say, okay, well, it's fine for legal advice. It's fine for some contract interpretation. It's fine for, popping out some legalese that I need to put into a document of some sort. But, I read somebody who was like, lawyers aren't going to be around anymore. No. Do you want an AI attorney? Put it in the other. Do you want an AI judge? At what point? Now, look, there's some really interesting conversations that we can have, because we could argue, well, my gosh, there's questionable biases in the court system right now by judges, and put all your politics aside, it doesn't matter. It's happening on both sides of the aisle. There is legitimate biases happening by judges in court systems. And so what if you said, well, look, we're just going to replace all the judges with AI, and really it's just a percentage. It's 49, 50, 51%, and you're guilty or not guilty, or it passes or it doesn't pass. Like, maybe on some level that would do us all good. But in a situation right now, like you said, I'm a human and I'm being charged for murder. And even if I've got a jury with my peers and I've got a judge up there who I would much rather have the human who may be having a very good day today. And I'll take those odds over a non-emotional artificial intelligence in that process any day. It's, yeah, for document purposes, yeah, have at it, enjoy. But to what extent do we go?
The old story of legal practice, that if you've got the law on your side in court, you pound on the law. And if you've got the facts on your side, you pound on the facts. But if you've got neither the facts nor the law on your side, you pound on the desk. And that's why you want the lawyer.
That's exactly it.
They can sway.
Yeah. In medical, it's kind of the same way. I've asked large groups. I've done speaking events, 500, 600 people in the room, and I've said, okay, raise your hand. You have a brain surgery come up, and the doctor comes in, and the doctor says, well, look, I have performed this surgery thousands of times. My success rate is about 97%. But we have this new artificial intelligence that have just come in. It hasn't done it much, but its success rate is 99.9%. Okay. You get your choice. Which one would you like? Now, how many people do you think said the human in the audience?
Oh, I'm sure 90% of them said
human. Yeah, most of them.
I would be 50-50 on that one, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's machine learning. I mean, it's like they say, everyone talks about cars and accidents, and they're very high profile when it's an AI. But when you think about it, one human has an accident, and lucky enough to survive it, will never do that again, whatever they did to cause the accident. But if an AI gets in an accident, every other driver that's using AI learns from that mistake. So it's the magnitude of learning and the speed with which those corrections happen is way better than human. So if something's already at 99%, my guess is going to be even better by the time he's finished my brain.
Yeah.
But who knows what he puts in there? He puts in there.
Yeah. These all create these kind of interesting, ethical, moral, humanistic types of conversations. This is where we're heading. Like there's no denying this. This is where we are heading. And so, how I kind of always want to think about it and talk about it is that if we know that this is inevitable, then how do we position ourselves today so that as we move in that direction, we are more prepared for it? Hype and misinformation about AI does not help that progress. Reality of where we are at and those hard questions will get us a little bit more, a better perspective on the future so that we can make these decisions and move, I think, more into an ethically, morally sound way of producing future AI.
I hope that you're right, because honestly, I see the technology accelerating, and it's the only thing that's slowing it down is our actual human behavior, right? The capacity of your phone is only probably used at 30% of what it can do, because we just don't have time or interest in most of the apps in it, or whatever the case may be. In AI, I mean, if you asked the app, took a slab of society and said, okay, if you're using AI every day, it'd probably be 5% of the people who put their hand up. And if it's every month, it may be a little bit more than that. But it's not a great chunk of the population that's actually using it. Yet it's just accelerating its ability. It's being used on them, but they are not using it.
Yeah.
If you're saying that there's still a big gap between what it can actually do and what we think it can do, I'll give you that. But I don't think it's a long time before we get to where it's definitely heading. And I don't think we'll be able to keep up. I mean, legislation has never been able to keep up with technology.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think businesses are going to necessarily, like, they all wrote that letter and then they all raced to the end zone. I don't think that the only thing that'll protect us is actual self-knowledge. And I don't know if we are spending enough time focused on self-knowledge and too much time focused on knowledge from TikTok or Instagram or other sources, which I wouldn't describe as knowledge. It's just entertainment. So I don't know. It's scary where we're heading.
100% agree with you. Like That's exactly it. And, we go back to the hype. My fear is that the hype is outweighing that self-knowledge, right? We are buying into these things, and glorifying these things without actually sitting and taking a moment to reflect on these things. Yeah, exponentially, we're not going to be able to keep up. The rate right now of AI growth, we're at an advancement every 3 months, roughly, right? And so if we think about this and we say, we're going to get to a point where the advancement is every 2 months, advancement is every month, advancement is every week, advancement is every day. Like, could we theoretically get to that point? And at what point in time does it cap? I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. Screw regulations. Like, that's never going to be, we're light years behind in regulatory change to help us with this. But we've got to figure out a way, to your point, of how do we educate ourselves on these realities and these tough questions and be able to. Now, unfortunately, is this a Pandora's box? Like, are we at a position where we can't get it under control at this point in time? I would like to think that we're not there yet. Yes, exponential, acceleration of the technology, but I don't think we've reached a point of, the point of no return. I think we're still able to quite hopefully get to a point where we can manage it a little better. Otherwise, yeah, then we're talking about a doomsday scenario. And I think that's, I've never been a believer in Terminator. Like, I don't think we're going to get a point where AI, becomes sentient and takes over, but we can't discount the human connectivity that has to be a part of this experience, or else, we're probably more along the lines of, if you've ever watched the movie WALL-E, Disney's WALL-E, it's a dystopian. You got a bunch of people floating in space that don't realize that, anything's changed. I think we're actually moving in that direction probably more, and that's still a scary space.
The frog in hot water, you mean?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I would suggest that your perspective is a North American perspective. And knowing that these technologies are available virtually to anyone who has a connection, there are a lot of people who would take advantage of it and not be as generous as you are as to where it could go and how it can help humans.
Generous is a good word. Yes, totally agree.
Yeah. Well, listen, is there anything I haven't asked you that I should have asked you that would be valuable? I mean, there's probably tons that would be valuable from your head, but is there anything that you wanted to say that I haven't asked you, Mark?
No, I mean, we covered a lot, obviously, and we probably could talk for another hour and come up with stuff to talk about. But yeah, really, I think we had a good broad conversation, covered a lot of stuff.
Okay. And well, actually, tell us a little bit about your company right now. You're a Poly AI, or is it?
Yeah, I've got a couple of companies that I'm managing and working with. We'll kind of go down the list. The first one is called Poly API. It is a integrations platform. It leverages AI more or less like a co-pilot to build integrations and APIs. So going back to our scenario where the handoff and context of the conversation between systems is not there, that's areas where we come in and we support and we can help bridge those gaps so that systems can talk to each other.
Is that like Zapier, or is it?
It's sort of like a Zapier type of scenario, but with the enterprise systems. So think about it.
Proprietary.
Yeah, either proprietary systems or enterprise-based systems. So let's say that, think about if you've ever gone to a hotel, and let's say it's a resort and they've got a golf course and you wanted to book a tee time. In most organizations or most hotels, resorts, you actually have to go to the golf course to book the tee time. But imagine if I could actually book the tee time on the television in my room, right? Those types of connections. Or let's say I'm at dinner and during dinner, I pay for my dinner bill, or I, assign it to the room, and I want to book a tee time when I'm there, as well as massage. Like, usually all those systems are different systems. We build the connections so that they can all be integrated to create better customer experiences. And we leverage AI to be able to do that.
I've got a couple companies for you to talk to on that one. Yeah.
So that's one. I'm also, I've got a game company called Muddy Robot Games, and we build video games. And then I've got another company called Sensible.
You've got to take me back to the name Muddy Robot. How did that come up?
Muddy Robot, the concept of Muddy Robot was Muddy represented the play, like a reflection on us as kids playing in the mud. Right. And Robot was intended for the future. So it was kind of past and future come together.
I
But what
love it.
really happened was about, I don't know, like 15 years ago. I also do a lot of domain. I manage domains, but I was looking through a bucket of domains, and this Muddy Robot popped up, and I said, "Wow, that sounds like a great name for a game company." I registered it, and for like 10 years, I sat on it. I said, "One day I'll make a game company. One day I'll make a game company." And then when I finally got around to doing it, boom, Muddy Robot, I made the game company.
That's great.
Um, and then Sensible AI, Sensible is an AI company that is building an emotional recognition platform. So basically, it will allow for emotional and behavioral intelligence baked into AI. It's currently pending patent. It's really a proprietary AI model, and it's all around emotional behavioral intelligence.
And when you say that, do you mean like a call center, somebody getting angry? And
No, actually, so there's two primary use cases for Sensible. One is actually in games,
Okay.
so that you can make the game worlds and environments more believable, realistic. And the other is actually for any type of retail space or engineering, like say you're building properties. So let's take Target, for example. I could go into a new location. I want to build a Target, and I could drop these kind of NPCs, fictional beings, into the virtual world, give them personality traits for the local area, and then simulate them how they progress through that store based on their behavioral patterns, and then map out like, well, walkways and navigation systems. So anybody who's building like large scale properties, this provides an AI tool to simulate real traffic through those environments.
Interesting. Wow. Very interesting. And you're a professor, adjunct professor at New Hampshire University.
I also teach. I teach a lot of business technology, artificial intelligence courses. I'm at Southern New Hampshire University. I'm an author. I've got a couple of books out. I'm working right now on a third book, and I speak, I consult, I do a lot of stuff. I stay busy.
What's in the third book?
The third book is all about autonomy. It's all about, it's called The Autonomy Illusion, and it basically breaks down the difference between automation and autonomy, and it puts together basically an argument as to why we have not reached autonomy in AI, and why autonomous, like autonomous vehicles as an example, has been an overglorified marketing term that doesn't really actually, a lot of what we've been talking about, when we start to confuse the semantics of words, it actually further complicates our self-knowledge and knowledge of AI, and creates some ethical accountability issues. If I can say, well, that's not our issue, it was an autonomous agent that actually made that decision, there's some real legal and accountability issues. So it touches on the clear distinctions and why autonomy in artificial intelligence does not exist.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, I look forward to reading that. And your book, Inf-AI-lable, is available on Amazon and other regular outlets. And the other one is called Customer-Centric.
Yeah, the first one is called Customer Transformation. It's a 7-step framework for building customer-centric organizations. The next one is Inf-AI-lable. And yeah, both books are available on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or other book platforms. So you can find them all over the place.
Excellent. Well, listen, it's been great, Chris, talking to you. I've learned a lot and have a different perspective as well. And I hope the same for our audience. And thank you for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it.
Take care.